Kim. So glad that you could join us this morning along with Jessie Gaylord. And I'll just give a quick intro and have you guys start chatting away.
Sounds good. I do want to apologize right up front. I appreciate everyone maneuvering to shift the time. Only the NNSA administrator could have moved this meeting. So, thank you.
We're honored.
Oh, we are happy to shift our schedule to make sure you could still participate, and very honored that you could make time for us this morning. So introduction to Kim Budil. She's our 13th lab director at Lawrence Livermore, and she's the first woman director, just celebrated her 1-year anniversary. And I've always appreciated that she's been a great supporter of the Women's Association at the lab and has always been willing to share her stories of her journey. I love thinking of her as a grad student, and I've seen the pictures through the years just of your career, Kim, and it's been amazing to follow you. Secondly, welcoming Jessie Gaylord as the moderator of this Fireside chat. She is the division leader for global security computing, and she oversees a large division that does very interesting research. And she, as I noted, was at our first WiDS Livermore event and has continually supported it throughout the years. So very appreciative. So please chat away.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that introduction, Marissa. So that's the official starting bell. So I'm super excited to be able to moderate this chat, Kim, because as Marissa said, here we are in Women's History Month, and you're the first woman director at Livermore, completing your first year, and with, let's just say, with fantastic results. We just got our scorecard recently from DOE, and I believe the highest in the national labs. Is that right? Yeah.
Highest in the NNSA.
Highest in NNSA. That is awesome. So congratulations on that. And, we have a variety of topics to talk about. Very interested in hearing your views, including leadership, diversity, inclusion, and empowerment. And this is intended to be a kind of informal conversation. Fireside chat, implying that we're both sitting by a fire somewhere, maybe later in the day. We ran into each other at a ski lodge. We've got a warm beverage. Not sitting on WebEx in our, I've got one too. Not sitting on WebEx in our respective offices, but here we are. And I know you have a hard stop at 10, so perfect. So we'll go ahead and get going. So starting with our first topic of leadership, what are the leadership talents or strengths that you rely on daily?
So I think there's two really important things I've learned about being a leader. The first is that I have a very clear sense of what I know and what I don't know. And so I'm very comfortable soliciting help and support and advice and knowledge from others. I think that's really important. It's always the case that there are many more things that you don't know than you do know, and really being comfortable and confident in that space is really important. The second is the power of saying you're sorry. I mean, everybody makes mistakes. Leaders make mistakes. I do my best to, have an inclusive and informed decision-making process. But if something goes in a direction I didn't intend, I try to clean up right away. And a simple "I'm sorry" can really go a long way. I view leadership as a collective activity, right? So building personal relationships is really important to that, and sort of the fundamental rules of how you should treat people come into play in that.
That's great. I've noticed that part of your leadership style has been to have a lot of decisions sort of started at the working group level, and there have been a lot of working groups, which is awesome. I think it plays into a lot of what you're saying and broadens kind of inclusion into those decisions. And then just as importantly, as you were saying about being able to course correct, things change, you learn more, situations change, and sometimes impacts are realized later, and to be able to retract and say, okay, we've now learned from that, we're going to do something different. Probably very important. I think those are really important leadership things, and I would add my own couple, which tie into that. Listening is something that I've learned as a leader, and as you were saying, what I don't know is much greater than what I do know, and often other people have it, and so by listening, I can pick up on that, hopefully, and then being responsive. Um, a lot of my job, and I'm sure yours even more, is responding to situations, responding to people. People, things need things, and I try as best I can to be super responsive, and then just trying to keep a lot of balls in the air. Again, I imagine your job is much more so, but trying to be organized, try to have some way of keeping it all going. So do you think that leadership is different for women than for men? A lot of these things that we just discussed seem like they'd be pretty universal.
Well, at first, I really relate to the things you added to the list, particularly being responsive. I think it was surprising to folks here. It's very important to me to be accessible. And so those crazy emails that I send around, I really write, and I insisted on having my own email that I could send from my desk so no one would be tempted to change what I said. And I think that made people uncomfortable a little bit in the beginning. So the basics of leadership, I think, are the same for women and men. How it plays out is different, right? Because we all grow up in a society that has expectations and cultural connotations to the roles that we play. And so I've always talked about being a woman in leadership as a double-edged sword, particularly in technical leadership. So I come from the physics community. Physics is topped out about 20% women PhDs. So if I go to a conference, a technical conference, to make a presentation, the likelihood that I am one of very few or the only woman in that environment is very high. That can be a huge advantage, right? People will remember me in a way they might not remember someone else. The other side of the sword is if I make a mistake or I'm, say something unfortunate, that's also more likely to be remembered. I think the second thing is the expectations we have for ourselves based on sort of the cultural expectations for women, right? We're supposed to be self-sufficient. We're supposed to be caretakers for others. We're supposed to, sort of carry the load quietly and with great determination. And I think women leaders often take more on than it's reasonable to expect. And and again, the world's not telling you have to take on all these things, but I feel it. I feel that it feels weak to say, well, no, I really can't do that. 8,000 thing you asked me, 8,001 is too many. And so I've had to really struggle with setting boundaries and not beating myself up about it. When my kids were little, I felt every day like I was failing somebody. I was failing my husband, I was failing my kids, I was failing my job, or I was certainly failing me. And so it's a little easier now. My kids are adults and can mostly take care of themselves.
They
But
never totally do though, do they?
no, the worries never go away. So I think those forces are important. It changes things to have more women in the room, and I feel it now because my core leadership team is all women.
Wow.
The senior management team is, more than 30% women. And so the environment feels very different. It's very freeing. It's a different kind of exchange. And so I feel it less acutely in this environment. So it's, I would say, neither better nor worse. It is different though. And it's important to remember that.
Yeah, you made some great points about the feeling of it's impossible to do it all, particularly if you're a mother of kids or even any other big life responsibility, and then also trying to succeed in a job. And I think probably every parent, I'm sure, regardless of gender, struggles with that. But I too felt it really strongly, and for a small portion of when my daughter was small, I was also a single parent. So I really honestly had to learn how to prioritize in a way that I hadn't learned previous to that. It was just an absolute necessity. Another thing for me, at least, is that I used to I used to think a lot. I really appreciated what you were saying about being the only woman in the room and how that can get you attention, both good and bad. I used to think I had to prove myself, if I would often be the only woman in the room, and or even if I wasn't, that I had to jump in and make sure people knew who I was and what I was about. And I think that I don't. Fortunately, I've kind of grown past that, I hope. And I think that maybe that's something that I felt because I was a woman. I needed to do more, perhaps more than I actually did. Um, I hope I've gotten over it. Probably still getting over it. So, how did you navigate power dynamics early in your career versus later in your career, when you had more formal leadership roles?
Well, I'd like to believe I got better at it over the arc of my career. Um, Early in my career, I would say I sought leadership opportunities first in friendly environments, places where I really felt like I could command the field. The Women's Association here was actually very formative early in my career. I worked with Lori Souza at that time to found the Women in Science and Engineering subcommittee, and we staged a number of conferences for technical women, and we really did a lot of activities. And I was able to step into a leadership role there. It felt natural. It didn't feel as intimidating to me. But it gave me great experience and it introduced me to a huge range of people across the lab. I chaired the Parent Advisory Council at the Children's Center when my kids were little, and that really gave me a chance to be both more involved with their lives, but again, to have a leadership role in another environment. In the technical world, I would say it was harder, and I grew up here in a very difficult environment. I did my PhD in the laser program, which is a very aggressive, um, fast-paced environment. And I learned over time, I developed a very thick skin. I mean, there's no two ways around it. It was a tough environment, and it was either learn how to defend your ideas and your work or find something else to do. And so it helped me. I mean, I did become able to defend myself and my work and stand up and represent my ideas. I wouldn't wish the methodology really on anyone. So, it was formative for me in the sense that I spent the rest of my career really trying to forge environments for people that weren't like that, that would have the same kind of intellectual rigor and excitement and difficulty, but without the corrosive personal difficulty that often went along with it. Later in my career, I got much more comfortable with who I was, what I knew, what I was good at. Um, I think I got comfortable saying I am good at some of these things. I may even be better than others at some of these things. I found I was a really great program manager. I'm a good scientist, but I was really great at putting ideas together, bringing people together in new ways, creating teams, thinking about new ideas, really interested in a broad range of things. And that turns out to be very useful when you're in management to, care about nuclear physics and computing and, experimental material science and manufacturing. All those things are important and they're very interesting and fun. And I had sort of a facility for that. And, I learned to play to my strengths. And so at some point in my career, I felt freed from the, sort of the constant striving and expectation in the beginning. I don't think I never stopped trying. Honestly, never stop worry about being called out as a complete fraud. I mean, it doesn't happen as often anymore, but that little voice is still in the back of your head telling you, "Are you really sure?" You know, but it's very freeing, and I think age is part of that. You know, I'm not as worried about what people think about me at this age as I was when I was 25. And so it's been an interesting journey. I think the other thing that's really important that I learned was the power of the network. I have a group of friends, a very strong network of women leaders across the lab, but also men across the lab who've all come up through the ranks together. And we support each other. We cheer for each other's successes. And that's enormously, enormously helpful. Even today, I still look to that group for advice and support.
Yeah, one thing that I've really enjoyed when I've received them and enjoyed just as much when other people receive them are the emails from the Women's Association saying we'd like to congratulate so and so on, you know, some recognition. It really does mean a lot. A lot of things that you just said really resonated with me. I too started in the laser program, and it was a really competitive environment as you described. And I think because I had grown up with four brothers, it and it was again a very competitive environment. It didn't seem. I think I came in with a hard skin, but it definitely helped me. And early in my career, you know, I was very low on the totem pole and trying to be a change agent. And so I learned to do that through facilitation, you know, find a win-win. And I think that that's something that those were very valuable skills for me to learn, that even in a hard environment like that, you know, find what you contribute and make the most of that and have other people see that this is the advantage of what you bring to the table. It develops a very service-oriented style of leadership, which I think I still try to still try you know, to bring with me. And I think that sort of helped me when you said, you know, you first are very conscious of yourself and then later not so much. That is, I think, definitely been true too. So no matter, I would say to young women, young men who are starting out as leaders, whatever it is you're thinking now is critical, critical, critical. Give yourself a little time and space, and it'll probably you'll learn something different about it, and in fact that different thing might make it less critical. So give yourself time to grow into the position.
Yeah.
And I guess that was a jump on our next prompt here, which is what advice would you give someone becoming a leader for the first time?
Give yourself a break. I think what we're just saying is just right. Be a little kinder to yourself. Worry a little bit less. You know, listen, learn, engage. You know, be part of what's happening, and try to spend less time focusing on the things that you don't feel where you're at your best. I
Yeah.
just, you know, those are learning opportunities, but you know, that sort of corrosive feeling of inadequacy, it's not worth it.
Yeah, the imposter syndrome. And probably everybody has it, but I think you particularly feel it if you're the minority in the room in any way, right? And you brought up earlier some really important things, I think, for people who are new leaders about utilizing your network and, you know, having a group of people you can go to, mentors, engage your broader team in decisions, learning to delegate, you know, all those things serve leaders well at every level. And the earliest you can make them part of your strategy, probably the more successful you'll be.
Yeah.
So, you know, another important aspect of leadership, which we just kind of mentioned a little bit, is tasking others. How do you develop delegation skills and the confidence to hold others accountable and not just pick up and do it yourself because you know you can do it perfectly?
Exactly. That's actually very hard. Um, and many of these lessons you can learn at home. So I've learned, because of my lifestyle and the amount of time I spend traveling, I've learned that I have to let it go and let others do things their way at home because I'm not there to micromanage it. But at work, um, an important lesson for me was the importance of making sure everyone understands what we're trying to do before you task them. I have a tendency to move very fast, and I think about things differently than other people do. It's neither better nor worse. It's whatever thought process naturally occurs to me. But I've had several situations where I'm moving at top speed. The path ahead is super clear. I know exactly where we're going and what needs to be done. I hand it off to an extremely capable person. They bring me something back, and I'm thinking, what on earth is this? This has nothing to do with where we're going. The path is over here, you're way over there.
That
And
happens to me every day.
yeah, yeah. And the lesson really was, I had a set of assumptions in my head that I hadn't shared with anybody. And so I spend more time talking to people now and talking through what the purpose is, not just what the thing is, but where we're trying to go to, giving them a sense of the sort of shape and outline of the path, not telling them how to do it, like making sure that I'm a little clearer about what I'm asking for. And we're still learning. We've spun up a lot of activities here at the lab about the importance of clarity. And, that means what it is your expectation is, when it's really needed. Does there need to be an interim step for feedback so that people don't feel, take away the uncertainty that's not needed. And I had a tendency to give sort of open-ended taskings, and that's just extra stress, right? People don't need to be wondering, gosh, I wonder when this is due, or, can I ask questions? What if I don't know what I'm doing? So I'm working on being, clearer, and I'm lucky now. I have a great team that can help me. I think the other thing that I've learned is I'm very clear with my team about how I work. I talk about things I think out loud. I want them to engage with me and argue with me and so on and so forth. But they should feel free to come back and say, I really don't understand. I need more help, more guidance, more clarity, or a better timeline. So
Those are some great points. I had a boss once who was a fantastic boss actually, but who didn't want to give people menial tasks, so would do those all himself, and thought that he was saving people by doing that, and really what it did was create a single point of failure and delayed succession planning, because often something that is menial to you is really an opportunity for someone else. So I just wanted to tack on to all the really important things that you said, that don't be afraid to delegate. Don't think that you're doing something bad to the other person. No matter what it is, you're very often helping them build experience and an important skill set, which maybe to you has become so routine that you don't see it that way. So lots of opportunity out of delegating. So I'm going to switch us now to the DEI topic. And what does diversity, equity, and inclusion mean to you, Kim?
So for me, diversity is a requirement for excellence. And diversity has many dimensions. There are the obvious dimensions of gender and race and sexual orientation and, ethnic background. But there's where you came from, what you've learned over the arc of your career, the discipline that you represent, the part of the country you grew up in. Were you an only child, or were you part of a big family? Are you tall or short? Are you, blue-eyed and blonde or a redhead? I mean, all of those things at some level contribute a different perspective to the decision-making process, and excellence demands that. If we are all one kind of person and all one kind of perspective, we will never get the outcomes that we seek. On the equity and inclusion part, I want to be in an environment where everybody can contribute to their fullest potential. So if we hire you here, I'm assuming we see value in you, and we should view it as our responsibility to create an environment that enables you to bring that value forward. And so, inclusion is the environment that we each create. I think that's the other thing that's really become clear to me over time. We talk about the culture as though it's something that acts upon us. It does, but we create it every day. So we each have the power to shape the environment around us and choose to create an environment that empowers, enables, uplifts, includes, supports others or not. And so for me, I guess the last part is that it's an action. You know, diversity, equity, and inclusion is not just an idea. It's the active way we create the environment around us to have those attributes.
Nice. I think that a lot of what you just expressed comes out in a lot of your communications to the lab and in a lot of your decisions. It's great to see. And in my life and career, I worked in other industries before coming to national security, and some of them had significant diversity of all kinds of ways. And much of my childhood also was spent in extremely diverse environments where I wasn't the typical person that I was interacting with on any given day. And it made for a really dynamic and interesting experience, broadened my perspective. It was fun. You know, it was fun to learn about other people and how they thought. You mentioned earlier in the leadership part that you need to be really clear when delegating, and that's definitely true. And one thing that I am constantly having to remind myself is that no matter how clear I think I am, other people come to it from a completely different perspective, and they're hearing something different. And I just have to constantly step back and remind myself that you know, people are all very different, and I see that as a hugely positive aspect, and makes for a lot of good food too, which another hugely positive aspect. So, what does a diverse workforce look like to you?
Well, it should look like, you know, our local community, our state, our country, and in science and technology, it should look like the world. I mean, it's an interesting question for us as a national security lab. You know, we are card-carrying members of the international science and technology community. We want the very, very best people working with us and for us on some of the most important and vexing problems facing the nation and the world today. And so everybody needs to have a place at that table. And I found it can be very hard to surface people's biases. I'll just give you an example. Early in my career, after I'd become a permanent staff member, I was talking to one of the people I worked with about recruiting. And so I got my PhD through UC Davis, Department of Applied Science, the old Teller Tech. And I said, well, we should really look at DAS students because they have clearances, they understand our work, they're part of our workforce already. And my boss at the time said, well, I would never hire anyone from there. And I said, well, I came from there. He said, well, you're different.
Right.
Well, you know, so-and-so came from there. And he said,
Yeah.
and I said, yes, and this other person and that person. What? No idea. And he had no idea because no one wears a badge that says, I got my PhD from UC Davis. Once you're part of the environment, you know, people don't think about that. If
Yeah.
I'd had to wear a badge that said I'm from Teller Tech, maybe he wouldn't have, you know, engaged with me the way that he did. So he wasn't seeking to, you know, be biased. It was just a natural instinct. I don't really
Sure.
know people from there. I don't think very much of them, and you seem to be some wild exception that turned out okay. But think about it, if you have to wear a badge every day. So you have to be a woman PhD in physics, or you have to be an African American scientist, or you have to be, you know, someone who is different, visibly different from the people around you, what that must feel like in the environment, right? So you need people in the environment who look like you, who come from where you come from, who share your perspective. And, you know, again, for a woman in physics at this lab, there was never going to be a day when I suddenly had, well, I guess I've totally undermined that by saying my senior team is women now, but it's complete, could change in a minute, right? it's just not like that. There aren't enough women for us to be a majority of the physics population on the site. So I had to find different ways to build community. I had to reach out across the lab. I had to look across disciplines. I had to, find my community in a new way. And so for me, a diverse environment, a truly diverse environment, would either make that extremely easy to do or unnecessary, right? You would just come in and it would be as natural as anything to have person X join the team and feel like they belong, see people like them, see themselves in this environment.
I think that that's great. And you brought up in there an important aspect of diversity in a diverse workforce, I think, which is like in your own experience, there are many aspects of diversity that you don't see and what that adds to the part that you do see. And, I think that it's important that we remember that even people who maybe all look a certain way, that too doesn't mean they think the way that we might attribute with that look. So really recognizing that there are many different perspectives in the world, many different points of view, and feeling like people coming into the lab, as you described, feeling like there's someone else with their perspective, their point of view. And we can all, I think, regardless of what we look like or what our background is, support that we can all recognize, and even if we don't agree, we can respect that there are other perspectives.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
do you have thoughts on how we can foster a more inclusive workplace climate?
Many thoughts, and we're working on it. I mean, at heart, I think there are a few things we really do need to work on. The first is something I said earlier, which I've really come to believe. I went through an executive coaching experience. I'm still working with my coach there. And one of the takeaways from that program for me was this idea of making good. Part of how you interact with other people is a choice to either make good or make bad. So are you positive, supportive, inclusive, etc.? So if each person walks into the workplace every day with the intent of making good, supporting, helping, enabling, it will be uplifting to the culture, and the culture will naturally shift in a new way. So we all have agency, we all contribute to the culture, and I really want to help people see how they can be a part of bringing that to the fore. I think we need to build structures and processes that promote equity and transparency in the workplace. I think lack of information is corrosive because people will fill it with they'll fill it with information that may not be true. And so everything about how we do performance management, ranking, salary management has an opportunity to be a positive influence on our environment or a negative influence on our environment. So I'm a big fan of more information on the street. Makes work a little harder for managers because there's a lot of clarity for the employees. But I think it's better for people to really understand where we're at and where they fit into that system, who their peers are, and what their next steps might be. And I think we do need to think about how we train and equip our leaders, because they really, leaders at the first level really have an inordinate influence on your life. If you have a bad group leader, I mean, that can ruin your whole experience. And so finding ways to help those folks build their toolkit and be effective in that environment. And it doesn't really matter if you're doing line management or program management. It's all people. So anyone who's doing a leadership role who says they're not managing people is not doing they're not doing it right. Because that really is how the work gets done. You motivate and support people to do the work. So upskilling our leaders and finding better ways to give people feedback on a more regular basis, so that you don't spend the whole year wondering how I'm doing and then get some bomb dropped on you at the end. But every day, every week, someone is talking to you in a way that makes you feel like, hey, they really want me to be successful here. So they're really working to build me, and building that culture of learning. So I still have a coach. I still do training programs. I still have huge amounts to learn. My coach will tell you I need to learn how to give feedback better. I'm working on it. But, it's not a bad thing to say I need new skills or different skills. If you're a technical person, that's really your job all day, every day for your whole career, is to keep learning and growing and advancing your capabilities. That really applies to every part of how we operate in the work environment. So, I think all of these things are important contributors and more, and that's why I've become a big fan of task forces. They have two great attributes. They move fast and they end, right? So the goal is to get some ideas from the employees, the affected people. What is it would make your experience of the workplace better? What are the things you're worried about? What are the things that would be enabling to you? And add those to the mix, and then do something about it.
Those are all great strategies and points. And I would just throw in the very simple non-strategy of just recognizing that people are different in any environment, and you maybe can't see what they're thinking, and that we shouldn't assume in any situation that everyone holds our view. Because no matter how correct we believe our view is, there will be someone who sees it slightly differently. So I'm supposed to be transitioning already 5 minutes ago to the next topic, but I was really anxious to ask you this question, so I'm going to ask it anyway because I think you do such a great job at it. And that is, do you feel you can bring your authentic self to work?
I do, and I'm not sure I could help it. So at this point, it's sort of a hopeless task to alter who I am. And there's a way you behave in a professional environment, that might be different than what I might do out and about on the weekend. But the fundamentals, I think, of who I am and how I behave are very similar at work and at home. If anything, I may be maybe a little bit more patient at work than I am at home. I apologize. All apologies to my family for that. But it's hard, right? So I'm 55 years old. No, 56 years old. It's hard to remember. It's taken a long time to get to the point where, this is just it. I may want to be better and I will work hard to be better, but I'm not going to change very much. But it took, decades to get to that place. And I didn't feel like the environment was moving me in that direction. That's really a personal journey to feel that way. And part of it was my journey involved going through many different environments, some of which were incredibly supportive and positive, and some of which were not. And gaining with each experience a confidence that I could succeed either way. I had something to offer, and it would be valuable, whether the environment understood it was valuable or not, including leaving the lab and going to the University of California, where I had a real experience of what diversity looks like. I worked for Janet Napolitano. In the president's cabinet, not only were we all incredibly different in every axis of diversity, we all did wildly different things.
Sure.
And so, navigating a completely new environment with no idea, no rule book. My predecessor didn't even leave me an email. I mean, nothing. Was incredibly important to put that finishing piece on it that just said, you can drop me in anywhere you want and I will find my way forward. So I want an environment that doesn't take 3 decades for folks to get to that point. I want our new hires to feel just as good coming to work and being themselves as I do now. And I hope we get there.
Oh, I think that you do a great job with it. I always feel like through your communications and your all hands in particular, like I have some sense of who you are as a person, and it helps me relate to the message, right? And I could be very wrong about that sense, but I feel like you have an honest projection of who you are, and particularly in this world of WebEx and telecommuting, I think that brings a lot that I've really enjoyed seeing a little tiny window into people's homes, just sort of what their life is like a little bit, and have realized through that experience that just that tiny little bit of sharing of who people are can be very engaging. And I tend to keep a pretty hard line between work and my personal life, because I tend to be a workaholic. I don't want it to just bleed over and totally usurp my personal life. So I try to keep this boundary. But I think it makes it harder then for me to show those little pieces of personality that I myself find so refreshing in others. So good on you, and keep it up. Okay, so empowerment is our next topic, and we've talked a lot about this already, I think. But how have you grown in confidence or resiliency over your career?
Partly by doing. Early in my career, when I would get an opportunity or see something interesting that I wanted to try, I would worry. I'm a worrier by nature, and just obsess over all the ways it could go horribly wrong. I often took the leap, but it was much more painful than necessary. Over time, this turned into what I call the worst case scenario test. A new opportunity comes up, and I would quickly try to assess, honestly, what's the worst possible thing that could happen? And really, in most cases, the worst possible thing is it doesn't work. You're either not good at it or you don't like it, and you find something else to do. I mean, my experience here has been there's always a new challenge, new program, new project, new opportunity, if you're willing to be adventurous. And so over time, that really made it easy to jump at big opportunities and spend less time, I think, worrying about them. I think I'm a naturally resilient person. I am optimistic by nature, and so even during the pandemic, I started to irritate myself with the number of times I talked about, oh, another silver lining. And it was true. It's just like you said about seeing people's lives. People were engaging, having these, really difficult experiences, but they were also connecting in a human way I'd never seen before. So, I don't know. Maybe it's my strong Midwestern upbringing, my plucky optimism, but I do.
Well, I have a strong Midwestern upbringing too, so it resonates with me. And we had talked a little bit before about, imposter syndrome and how feeling different impacts empowerment. How do you handle situations that make you feel nervous?
Well, first I grind about them, and spend an inordinate amount of time, particularly in the middle of the night. I have found that quite literally things seem darker in the middle of the night. So if I wake up, it's very dire. As soon as the sun rises, things feel better, more manageable, and then I tackle them. In general, my best cure for things that really scare me is doing them. Once you're actually in the act of doing, the level of fear goes down dramatically. And I've even, not fully, but at least partially conquered a crippling fear of heights, for example, to the point where going in an elevator in a tall building could give me the sweats. I mean,
Wow.
And early in my grad school career, I had some friends who did rock climbing, not multi-pitch super high, but top roping, where you'd go up, 50 feet or something like that, come back down. And the secret is, when you're climbing, you're never looking down because it's hard. You're always looking up. You just keep going. And so I found I really enjoyed it. And slowly over time, that sort of chipped away at it. I mean, I still don't want to stand on a ledge out exposed, but I can ride in an elevator, and I can look out a window in a tall building and, manage the anxiety that comes with it. So
Are you rock climbing?
I haven't rock climbed in a long time, although I've thought about it. I'm stronger now than I was probably then. But no, I love my shoes.
Awesome. I was gonna add to this that, something that you mentioned earlier about handling situations that make you feel nervous, remembering what you bring to the table and having that be, at the front of your mind when you're in this situation, whether, whatever it is. But it really resonated with me when you said that acting on it, having a plan, making something, putting some piece of it under your control, can be very reassuring. So I'm sure that I already know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Do you feel it empowers others, even peers, to give them constructive criticism?
For sure. I know it empowers me to understand, you know, one of the um, real, one of the really alarming things about moving up in leadership is how people start protecting you from information. And it's a real failure mode. First of all, it's a real failure mode to not know what's going on. That's bad. But it's a real failure mode to feel like you know what you're doing when you don't. People need to be able to tell me, maybe quietly, preferably not on this WebEx, but at some point, close the door and say, "That really didn't go the way you thought it did," or "Here's a better approach," or "Have you really thought about this? It's not a good idea." Um, and so I feel that acutely with others. And as I said, I'm working on my feedback giving skills because it is so critically important to help my leaders that I work with understand how to be as effective as possible in their roles. What are my real expectations for them? What are the areas where they really need to put time and attention? And so, it's not always easy, but I think listening to feedback, really listening, not to why the person is saying it, not to, even sometimes the way the person is saying it, but the words, what's the crux of it, is the way you learn.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I'll just give you some real-time feedback. There have been several comments in the chat about what an excellent communicator you are, that you're really doing a fantastic job of getting your points across, much more so than me, by the way, that you're speaking in complete sentences and not halting, and showing a clarity of thought and communicating it well. So thank you for that.
I think you're doing a fabulous job, Jessie. So that is my honest feedback to you.
I wasn't trying to grope for it, but I'm trying to learn from how you're doing this really well. I'm trying to make notes for my next time. I'm going to do better. So we're coming around to the end, and I wanted to be able to ask just a little bit of wrap-up questions and then have some time for questions. But we had so many great topics here. I've got to ask another couple more if you're willing.
Sure.
Who are your role models, and why do these people stand out in your life?
So my first most formative role model was my mother. She never graduated high school. She grew up in a super dysfunctional family. And she met my dad when she was working in her first job and got married and had 3 kids very quickly. I was a fourth child, separated by 11 years, so sort of a second family. In her 40s, she went back and got her GED. I never saw her without a stack of library books, 2 feet deep. She was very smart, very capable, just had not had the opportunity to do the things she wanted to do. And so that was really both parts of that. Her immense capability and this sense of limitation both were very impactful for me. I was not going to let someone else dictate to me the terms of my life. And so I went off. And my parents really were clear that education was a gateway to something better. Didn't much matter what, but do something that you have real passion for and commit yourself fully. So that was really important. I had some great women early in my career that I worked with, who were working scientists. One was Sarah Allendorf, who's now across the street at Sandia and a manager there. She was a postdoc when I was a graduate student, and she was just such a great mentor on how to learn how to own your capabilities and participate in the environment and, be a scientist. And the other was Donna Strickland, who won the Nobel Prize a couple of years ago. And that one's interesting. She spent a year here. Again, I was a graduate student, and Donna's very smart, but she's an extremely no-nonsense person. I mean, just the nicest, most normal person. It's the exact kind of person you want to win a Nobel Prize. She's so normal. And she really spent a lot of time working on me. Stop saying you're sorry for everything, right? Don't apologize. They're just these weird tics and things that I've developed. So those people were really important to me. I have lots of people over time that I've looked to for inspiration, but I think those fundamental lessons are really where it's at. There's many people here today who inspire me, who just are doing amazing things I can't conceive of doing myself. I'm just, so excited to get a chance to work side by side with them. So.
Yeah, that really resonates with me. It sounds like you've had some awesome mentors, and that's fantastic. That makes such a difference. And then just broadening it out to our employees. One thing that I really love about being in line management and in management in general at the lab is I get to interact with so many people, from new hires to people who are, very established in their careers. And I am wildly impressed by the stuff that our employees do, and not just their tech skills, which are super impressive right there. There's such a huge variety of things to do, and people have expertise in such a big number of them. But then on top of that, there's so many that are very, very dedicated to another huge variety of outside interests, very accomplished musicians and artists, and in community service, and or our physical activities, just every kind of a thing. People really stellar, and it amazes me. I look to them all of wow, how can I learn to do something like that? That's so impressive.
Yes, I was just looking at a picture of Valerie Noble finishing the Livermore half marathon,
Right.
sub 9-minute miles, thinking I'd give my right leg to be able to do that. Probably wouldn't be able to run. I'm a very slow runner.
Yeah, right.
Hey,
Exactly.
someone gives me an opportunity to think, gosh, I want to be like them.
Right. There's mentors all over the place, and it's just a matter of, I think it's the bookend to not only knowing what you bring to the table, but being able to see what others bring to the table, and that's what makes the world so interesting.
Yeah.
So this has been fantastic. I am going to pull us down to just maybe one closing question, and then we'll see if there's any questions from the audience. But how do you see the workforce and the workplace evolving at Livermore, and where do you see data science fitting into that? And then additionally, what do you think it means for women, but really anybody looking to start a career here?
So I'll do the last part first because I think it's very simple. This is an amazing time to join this place. There's so much opportunity right now, such an expansive range of mission and science work going on at the lab. It feels to me like it did when I first came here, the land of opportunity. And so I would say for people who really want to have that experience of following their passions and the interesting problems and really feeling part of something important, this is the place to be. On the data science, it is everywhere, and I mean everywhere. One of our big efforts this year is to bring skills of data science to HR, to understand our workforce and be able to better understand how to plan for the future across this, incredibly complex space that we're navigating. So every single disciplinary activity and operational activity we have at the lab is going to be underpinned by much greater use of data science and the tools of computing in one way or another. We always talk about the lab having, historically we talk about the lab having two pillars. High energy density science, as embodied by the National Ignition Facility, is one. computing, particularly HPC, but increasingly data science, AI, machine learning, emerging efforts in quantum, you know, residing at the very leading edge of whatever is happening in computing. And the third emerging pillar is manufacturing and advanced materials. And in each of those areas, the work we're doing in computing is revolutionizing how we think about them. So it's very hard. We started talking about AI and machine learning, and then the next year's SI proposals, all but one was focused on application of AI and machine learning to some new problem. So it is a huge opportunity for us to bring new tools to bear. And I would say along with that are the tools that enable us to really work at the scale that we aspire to work at. So I have had some conversations, particularly with the computer science professionals at the lab, you know, in the core mission area. The historic paradigm was physicists wrote codes, you know, of the physicists, by the physicists, for the physicists. Then there was a realization that computer science is actually a thing, and we actually need people with, you know, the right skills to come in and be partners in this enterprise. And increasingly, what we're learning is that computer science, the tools of computer science, and real expertise in hardware, software, enabling capabilities, and all these different tools and technologies is the key to exploiting the computing that we're going to be putting on the site. So, you know, I'm just saying the need for a lab like ours has never been greater. So I am committed to making sure we don't miss this opportunity. And that's, you know, in our core mission of nuclear deterrence, but across the defense space, bioresilience, climate and energy, you know, we have a lot to offer, and computing will be at the heart of all of that.
That's fantastic. I liked it when you said, you know, we realized computing became a thing. Who knew? But you brought up some great points there, and you know, not just the pervasiveness of data science, but the other thing I think that Livermore brings to it is, you know, we do a lot through our matrix system and just through the way that we work to have multidisciplinary teams. And multidisciplinary teams are the thing that really make, in my view, data science sing. You know, it's not just a statistician off in a corner crunching numbers. It is a domain expert, a data wrangling expert, a systems expert, the statistician, and whoever else you can throw into the mix. And again, it falls into the whole why have diversity? You need to have all of these viewpoints to really come up with the answers. It's not just applying the methods to the data. It requires, you know, all of these perspectives and all of these skill sets to make it happen. And I think another important aspect of the lab is that our workforce is becoming younger and more dynamic. You know, the average age is dramatically starting to come down, and it's changing the way that the place is, and people are viewing careers, you know, in the perspective of a broader career that may include other things as well. And people are, you know, I think what comes with that is people are more open and engaged and expect communication. You know, a lot of the things that you're doing, I think, foster that environment and feed into it really well. So I agree with you. It's a super exciting time, and it'll be really fun to see how Livermore evolves. You know, with the all of the mission areas that you mentioned, you only need to look at current world events and realize that the importance of national security is just nonstop. And I thank you very much for all of those comments. So we have only like 1 minute left, but I haven't seen that there are lots of questions in here. Did I miss something?
So someone just asked about, did I have a lifelong, was I sculpting my career toward being lab director?
Ah, excellent.
And I'm just going to make an observation on that. So where did I get my mugs? Everywhere. And now people give them to me, including my great Livermorium mug. I've done a lot of things over the arc of my career. As you move up in the lab, the number of potential positions that are next gets smaller. So at some point, you know, you're thinking about being on the senior management team. And at some point from the senior management team, you're thinking, what's your next step? And so it's easy to say, okay, then, well, the next step might be lab director. I will tell you that the moment of throwing your hat in the ring, submitting yourself for that scrutiny is a real gut check moment. It's very different to think about actually doing it, to think about it as conceptually. And so only in the last few years has it been clear to me that it's something I could do. You know, not that I'm the right person or the needed person or whatever, but that I felt personally like I could put my name forward, and if they draw my name from the pool, I would be able to do the job. And so this is just, it's the surprise and honor of a lifetime to be here. I could never have imagined this. Never.
Well, not only are you doing the job, but you're doing an excellent job at doing the job. And I think
We all survived 1 year. That's great.
you did a fantastic 1 year, and I'm sure more to come. And I think that the emotions that you just described could be true of every person looking at taking that next step. And you know, imagine yourself in the job and realize you can do it, or probably the biggest parts of it. Well, thank you so much, Kim. This has been a huge honor, and I really appreciated hearing all of your views. These are very relevant topics, and I thought you had a lot of great things to say about them. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Jessie. I appreciate the invitation. Again, the flexibility was really appreciated. And this was really fun. I mean, you did a fantastic job and made this as easy as possible for me.
Well, thank Marissa. It was all her idea. She's the one who set it up. So
I really enjoyed your conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your stories.
You're welcome. And thanks everybody who attended. It was really fun.